Good afternoon, everyone. Those of you who are farther back, you should feel free to come closer if you wish. Shana Tova once again. As you know, through the years, Temple Emanu-El has developed very close ties with Israel's diplomatic offices in New York. Throughout the year, we worked together with them to strengthen liberal Jewry's commitment to Israel and Israel's commitment to liberal Jewry. And through their generosity for 10 years now, we have been privileged each Rosh Hashanah to welcome a representative of Israel's government to greet us and offer insights on the goings-on in our spiritual homeland. Certainly much has transpired since last year at this time, and with new elections on the horizon, there is much to discuss. So this afternoon, I'm really very honored to welcome back to Temple Emanu-El Consul General of Israel in New York, Ambassador Asaf Zamir. Ambassador Zamir began his tenure just under a year ago, representing the state of Israel not just to New York, but also to New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Delaware too. Born in Israel, Ambassador Zamir grew up in Florida before returning home to finish school. After graduation, he completed his national service in the Israel Defense Forces as part of the Central Control Unit in the Israeli Air Force. Then he attended Tel Aviv University, where he earned a law degree. In 2008, Ambassador Zamir was elected deputy mayor of Tel Aviv, to which he was re-elected in 2013 when he assumed all responsibility for the city's educational system. Throughout his municipal career, Ambassador Zamir promoted and implemented many important programs, including those relating to the arts, youth activism, affordable housing, public transportation, education equality, and civil rights for minorities, the LGBTQ community, and the refugee community. Then in the April 2019 elections, Ambassador Zamir entered national politics as part of the Blue and White Party. In May 2020, with the formation of the National Unity Government, he was appointed Minister of Tourism. Later that year, though, he resigned, calling for new elections, and he played a key role in the effort that eventually led to the formation of the most diverse government in Israeli history. It was then that he was appointed ambassador and Israel's consul general in New York. Ambassador Zamir is deeply committed to the development of religious pluralism in Israel, a cause very close to our hearts. In fact, he and his wife, actress Maya Wertheimer, who joins us, were married by Rabbi Meir Azari, who leads Kehilat Beit Daniel, a Reform congregation in Tel Aviv. And they have a daughter, Asya. And so, as a new year begins, I am deeply honored and most grateful to welcome for what will be one of many visits during the course of his tenure, Ambassador Asaf Zamir.
Thank you for that heartfelt introduction. It would be so much more impressive if I didn't know that my staff wrote it for you. But still, it's still nice to hear that bio in English. It sounds better than in Hebrew. Shana Tova, everyone. This is my second visit to Temple Emanu-El. My first one was because we hold a yearly Yom HaZikaron ceremony in the other sanctuary, the middle-sized sanctuary, and today was the first time that I had the opportunity to see the main sanctuary full, and it is an amazing sight, honestly. So it's a great honor for us to be here, both my wife Maya and I. As you said, I left general politics about a year and a half ago, and I told my wife, I can't deal with the tension anymore, the divide, the hatred, the polarization. I said, let's go to a place where none of that exists. We'll go to the United States of America to work with the Jewish community. It'll be calm and uniting and fine. And I honestly, I know it sounds funny now because it's the end of the first year of my tenure, so I've learned a bit. But I grew up in Florida between 1984 and 1989, and even though I was a little child, I'm pretty sure my memory that hasn't fully failed me, and that the reality of this country was very different back then, and the reality of its relationship with Israel was very, very different back then, and the reality of the unity of the Jewish community generally, and the relationship between American Jewry and Israelis, were all different and to the better 30 years ago. And I see it as my mission to do whatever is in our power during my tenure to try and make that change for the better. And I come from an extremely complex country, and I am now serving in an extremely complex country. And it takes being in both to understand that some of the reasons we've separated are for basically internal reasons in each of the countries. They don't always have to do with each other. And when I grew up, Israel enjoyed an extremely bipartisan status and support. Well, today, nothing in the United States is bipartisan. There is no consensus. So it was almost childish of us to think that in this kind of climate, Israel could be the one thing everyone would say, that's amazing, that's great, hats off to that, we fully support that no matter what, always. And obviously things that have happened in my country have also helped parts in the United States to feel disconnected, and the unopenness of the Israeli governments for years to all Jews has contributed dearly to that status as well. So it really has come from a lot of different directions. But the thing that troubles me most here is not the current situation, but the future. And if I look 10 and 20 years to the future, and I look at the younger generation in both countries, but I'll talk about America today, which is the younger generation of American Jewry, which is supposed to hold the torch and protect the bond, even in harder days, to be the future lobbyists, philanthropists, activists, and organizers. That needs a special inner feeling that I feel doesn't exist today to the extent needed. And I haven't wrapped my head around the reasons it's happened here, but I know, and Rabbi said I can share some insights about our country today, but I know what the primary reason for it in Israel is. And I think that we deal with Israel a lot in the United States and talk about Iran as a very big threat, and talk about the Abraham Accords as a symbol of optimism and hope. And we talk about the region, and we talk about inner religious wars. But the one thing that I think, when I'm asked, is the most problematic and interesting phenomenon about Israel is its inner domestic demographic change and disconnect. Because I grew up in the United States and I went to a public American school, and in the public American school, this is the one main insight I'll share with you today. In the public American school, everyone goes to school together. There are Jews and Christians and Muslims. They can be religious and secular. They can believe in whatever they want, eat whatever they want, think whatever they want. And they go home and do whatever they want, because there's a full separation between church and state here. And that staying together in a classroom generates a generally broad ethos or agreement of what America is. So when you finish school, you kind of understand. Israel, on the other hand, not many people think of this, is unique in a bad way, in which it has 4 different schooling systems, 3 of which are fully public and fully segregated between what we call in Israel secular, modern Orthodox or national religious, Muslim and Christian Arab, and then ultra-Orthodox, which is privatized, fully private, just like here, and study only Torah, just like parts of the schools here. But if you're an Arab in Israel and you're 3 years old, you are put in a public Arab school, surrounded just by Arabs, and you study in Arabic. If you have a yarmulke, you go to a public school in Israel, you will go to a public school where everyone has a yarmulke. You will have more Jewish studies. These are the only people you know. And these four groups, for many reasons, are going and becoming almost the same in size. And they are spending their years till the age of 18 surrounded only by people that look and believe the things they do. And then they finish they finish school at 18, and then we expect everyone to come together for a kumbaya. But they listen to different radio channels and read different news and watch different TV shows and believe in different things and don't really know each other in any way. In any way. And it is extremely severe because it happened historically for political reasons, and it never will change. So today, in Israel, if you're 18 and you finish high school, you enter the world as an adult into a country that is in a full-blown identity crisis. If you ask 10 different kids that are 18 in Israel, what are Israel's borders? You will get 10 different answers. At least 4 different answers. If you ask what is the relationship between state and synagogue, between religion and civic life, where in the United States you're supposed to get one answer, you'll get 5 different answers in Israel. If you ask what constitutes our constitutional law in Israel, there is none. It's a matter of how you regard the Supreme Court. It's complicated. Just like everything in Israel, it's very complicated. And in these 3 realities, an 18-year-old boy, whether he is Muslim or Jewish, religious or secular, Orthodox, conservative or reform, has to understand, grasp himself around that, and then as a group, govern together. And governing together in that divide, virtually impossible. That is why, and I always tell this as a joke, but it's not funny anymore, I was elected to Knesset 3 times. That's a great track sheet for a politician. But I was elected, all of the 3 times happened in 1 year, because we had 3 elections that year. And it's not becoming much better, right? So this year, there was a formation of a changed government after 12 years, of the most diverse government in the history of Israel. It had Muslim Brotherhood inside, it had modern Orthodox inside, it had right wing, left wing. I thought it was a extremely important opportunity for Israel. We are now going to elections. They will happen on the 1st of November. If you look at polls, not a lot is going to change. On the other hand, just a few days ago, the Israeli Prime Minister spoke at the UNGA, at the UN, and spoke for the first time after many years about Israel's commitment to a 2-state solution, which is something that, coming from Israel and living in Israel, we haven't heard for a long time. We can go into that, just that, for an hour. I won't, but I saw that as a point that reminded me that even in this extremely complex situation, positive change can come. I remember the morning of the Abraham Accords. If you would have told me, or probably any of you in the audience, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, that you would wake up in Israel, we have a peace agreement with the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan, just like that, you would think I'm crazy. One of the most interesting things that happened after the signing of these accords were the immediate warming up of our very cold peace agreements, long-lasting but cold, with Jordan and Egypt, that saw what was happening in the region and decided to take it up a notch. So Israel's challenge this year, or these years, is a regional challenge, as we talked about, but moreover, how to learn to live together inside. And I think that you as Americans can relate in a way to that challenge. What I did learn in my first year here was how Judaism outside of Israel looks up close, and how the Jewish people can thrive in extremely pluralistic environments. And just in the past few days, visiting Orthodox, conservative, and Reform shuls that were full and packed in the city of New York, it was a reminder to me of what a beautiful religion we have, and how amazing it is when it's approachable, and how amazing it is when everyone can do it the way they believe they can. And we don't have that in Israel yet. We have a lot of liberal people in Israel. And if you personally ask them, do you mind if people get married however they believe? Most of them won't mind. And still to this day, I was a minister in the government. My wife and I are a pretty well-known married couple in Israel, but we are formally not married. We are formally not married to the point where when she wanted to get our passports signed married, we can't. That's our reality in Israel. And still, a very interesting or philosophical question is, why is it that so many people in Israel that have liberal views about religion and come here to the United States and see this and say, I wish we had this in our country, this is amazing. Why do they come back to Israel and not care about that enough to change that? Or in other words, why is home of the Jews, which is supposed to be home for all Jews, not accepting to all forms of Judaism? And I think about that a lot this year. And I think it's coming to me that it's just taking us more time than it takes here. That we have a different commitment and we have a different set of priorities, and we have to kind of weigh in not just the personal freedoms, but the national implications of them. And I don't think we figure out yet as people, I'm saying this not as a diplomat and not as a politician, as a former politician looking from the side, and as someone that wants dearly that Israel will be fully pluralistic and liberal in its Judaism. We have not yet to figure out how to make sure Israel is fully accepted as the one Jewish state in the world, accepted by all the world, safe by all the world. I don't think we're sure enough in that yet as a collective to say, now we let everyone inside decide how to define that. And I think the reason that a lot of people that are extremely liberal and believe in it, when they go and vote, when they debate about it, say, we can wait with that. It's because we're a young country. We're not a country that has a separation. We are a Jewish country. There needs to be one. I'm pretty sure everyone in this room believes in that generally or universally. And we haven't figured out yet how to do that and that together. And if I have to finish my words by saying, "B'le'achel mashu," is that I hope next year we'll be in a better place in both. I hope we'll be more accepted. I hope we'll see less anti-Semitism on campuses, on social media. I hope we'll see less anti-Semitic attacks. I hope we'll find a way to see more unity between the United States and Israel, and between Americans and Israelis, and American Jews and Israeli Jews. And I hope we reach a point in that where your amazing pluralism in Judaism will infiltrate Israel and make us as liberal as you are. Until that happens, I'll be happy to come here and talk as many times as needed, but I tried to keep my intro as short as possible because Rabbi said we can do questions and answers today. So if you want to take the opportunity, because I'm here, to ask any question about Israel or about anything. Do you want to host this? Yeah.
Just sure, I'll call.
Sure.
Call on me. Yeah. Okay. So Barry, why don't you stand up? Just speak really loud. So.
If the school system in Israel is not an homogenizing factor in Israeli society, does the next step of Jewish life, at least for many, the Israeli military, serve as that melting pot, that homogenizing factor?
Well, I'll give you numbers. The question is based on what I said about the educational system. Does that mean that the place where everyone is combined and functions as a melting pot socially and religiously is the IDF, is the army? The answer is, sadly, that if you look at the demographics of Israel today, if you go to first grade, then 52% of the kids in first grade in Israel today will not go to the army because they are either ultra-Orthodox or Israeli Arab. The rest, the other 48%, which looking down the line will become maybe 46%, maybe 44%, maybe 42%, they will continue to see the army as a melting pot, but it is a melting pot between different social economical levels of secular and modern Orthodox Jews. That's what it is. And it's a problem because it used to be different, because the numbers used to be totally different. The reason that, I'll just say this, the reason that the educational system was built this way is because the numbers were so different that it didn't look as if it would be a problem. 85% at the beginning were part of the secular, Zionist, general movement, and then these were very small minorities which were given a kind of autonomy, but they grew very much and the other group became smaller.
Yeah. Our president is
Hello. Happy birthday, Mr. President.
It's an honor actually to have you here, Pastor. On behalf of the entire congregation, as our rabbi said.
I can't hear.
But I guess my question to you is, first, I appreciate your candor, but what can we as a reform movement, as a sort of lead example of reform, given some of the issues you've raised, some of our congregants have gone to Israel and had problems with mitzvahs, or as you say, marriages, what do you think we can do? Not to put you on the spot, but as a Jew, I'm putting you on the spot. What do you think we can do? What should we do?
Obviously, I won't tell you what you should do. I can tell you what I wish you'd do. But that's the maximum I can say. I think you were a huge group, very influential in society. And the way I remember it as a younger child, very connected to Israel, with all of your beliefs and with all of your ideology. And I think, and I say this very carefully, that the segment in the population of you has become smaller because you've found, or your children are finding it harder way to balance their Judaism and connection to Israel with their social life and general beliefs in the United States today. And I think that if it's the easy thing to do is to give up on that and say, believe in whatever you want and do whatever you want. And I know where that ends. And it doesn't end with having a strong relationship with Israel. And if you don't have a strong relationship with Israel, it definitely means that only people that think the opposite of you about everything in life are the ones that have a strong relationship with Israel and are the ones that influence Israel. So the thing is, I know because I saw the Israeli flag behind me when I walked in, and I saw the Israeli flag in the central sanctuary, is that the base of the alliance, you understand it, and you feel it. But A, it cannot be taught. What you've experienced with Israel in your life cannot be passed on to your kids just by sitting in a room and talking about Israel. It has to go through having Israel be a substantial part of your life. It's not one birthright trip and then however you feel about it. It needs to be visiting family, going as much as possible, having important, substantial moments in your life happen in Israel for your kids in order for them to understand it. And it needs to happen at a young age, because if your children reach college without having a deep, firm understanding, context, history, geopolitics, the ability to answer back, and the inner understanding of why you can be extremely critical of things that happen in Israel today, and you can be extremely critical of governmental policies, just as you are here sometimes, without forgetting why the base of the relationship and the historical importance as Jews of the land of Israel to all of us. If you can balance between both things, you will generate a next generation of people that can be influential to Israel, and will live to see the day where Israel is open for everyone, where you can pray wherever you believe and marry however you want, and influence more and more Israelis in that way, because there are many that believe in that. But what I'm seeing today is less of what I just said and more of just giving up and giving up. Because, and I'm not saying this in a criticism, it's very hard to raise kids today. It's a very different language, and no one is having deep conversations. It's a generation of 5-second TikTok, yes or no, good or bad, black or white, you're in or you're out conversations. Israel has a very complex, it's complicated story, and if no one's willing to listen to that story for more than 5 seconds, we're done to begin with, which has been our fate for thousands of years. We're used to it, we always overcome it somehow, but that's your major challenge, and that's where I would wrap myself around, which is the very young people and how to generate a reality in which they can understand Israel, understand their connection, be sure about it, and bring that into their social circles. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem, which I know you already feel you have.
Yes, please.
Yes, hi. First of all,
Bellis, yeah, speak loud.
first of all, your daughter's name is my daughter's name.
Asia?
Yes. So I've never heard people pronounce it this way and actually give you a nickname in this country. So,
Wait, what do you call her in the country?
easy.
AC? Okay, we'll think about it. I'm not saying an automatic, no. I'll think about it.
So almost 30 years ago, no one could say that. So anyway, my daughter just graduated from college. I hear what you're saying, and I've seen everything what you're talking about. And it's extremely complicated to talk to young people about what's happening on campus, about all the demonstrations, about all the opinions and such. So I actually I'm not that good. But yesterday I told my youngest daughter, just graduated, that your cousin from Russia is running away from St. Petersburg to Tel Aviv. He's traveling all the way to Siberia to take like 4 weeks and get there. What's happening, like in general attitude, opinions with people finally writing their mind that they have to leave Russia and how they be viewed in Israel?
That's the question? Okay. I'll repeat the question. I'll repeat it in the way that's, as a former politician, comfortable for me. Okay? It's not exactly what she said, but it's how I heard what she said in my mind. She said, Asaf, what do you think about the Russian-Ukrainian conflict in regards to Israel's role in it, which is different than other nations' roles? Can we agree that that was your question?
Well, also, what's your attitude toward people who are not trying to come to Israel?
The attitude to people who are now trying to come to Israel, in Israel, is generally a very good attitude. It always is a good attitude. We have a very famous sketch in a movie called Lul, which it's very famous. It shows the waves of Aliyah that come to Israel throughout the years and how they are discriminated against and everyone's racist against and they suffer dearly, and then the next Aliyah that comes, they do the exact same thing too, and everyone's discriminates against the last people that came in, and it's a very Jewish thing, saying, close the door after me, let me in, but then don't let anybody in. That's generally. It's also now very trendy in clubs in New York, but we invented it in Israel. And I was asked many times at the beginning of this conflict, why is Israel not acting exactly like the United States? Why are you winking, or why is it taking you longer to reaffirm the agreements at NATO, to choose Ukraine's side? Why are you? And my answer was that we're not America, and we are not any other country, for a few reasons. The short version is that at the end, we stood behind the United States and NATO. We very much chose a side in this war, which is the Ukrainian side. We were one of the first countries to send hundreds of tons of equipment to Ukraine and to open the first field hospital, not near Ukraine, in Ukraine, with Israeli forces coming in near Lviv. But there are two things that you need to take into consideration which make our decision-making process harder. The first is an interest-based answer, which is we are a small country that is dealing with extreme security issues, and we have an effective border with Russia because our Syrian border is Russia-controlled, and we simply don't have the luxury to to have a full-blown war on that front. I'm saying it lightly. We need to maintain our ability to coordinate with Russian troops on the Syrian border. I'll say this lightly. If it was up to us, we would prefer American presence in Syria, but there is none. There's Russian presence in Syria, and we have a border with Syria. That's a fact, and we need to take that into consideration. That's from an interest-based point of view. But from a value-based point of view, which to my belief is more important, there is no country in the world that has a moral obligation to its diaspora. It doesn't exist. Israel is the Jewish state. It needs to be able, this is its one mission, to cater to the needs of all Jews in the world. And there are 200,000 Jews in Ukraine, and there are 500,000 Jews in Russia. And we have always maintained diplomatic corridors that would allow us in harm's end, exactly to have your cousin be able to decide to move to Tel Aviv, because as history proves, we can't rely on anyone else to take care of all the Jews. So we approach this, even though we chose one side, we voted for that side in the UN and all that, but we have a more delicate relationship because we have these responsibilities that other people don't have. And even if we are criticized because of that, the moral Jewish obligation is of a higher level than the criticism.
Yes, please. Oh, David, yeah, good.
Picking up on the separation of schools, from an urban planning and a land use planning point of view, is anything being done to bring communities together? By extension, from a land use planning point of view, is anything being done that will actually enable two-state solution?
Did my wife ask you to ask that question? Yes, because it's a question, it's really tailored for me. Things are being done. I have the honor to tell you that I was the deputy mayor of Tel Aviv and in charge of the educational system of the city, and as that, I was the first person in the city to give land to open the only bilingual Arab-Jewish school in Jaffa, in which they study with 2 teachers in a class in both languages and celebrate both holidays in an attempt to create a reality in which people grow up together and then from a younger age don't hate each other. It's very hard to promote hatred if you already know someone and don't hate him. And those initiatives happen around Israel. They don't happen enough because most people don't want them. Because most people value other things more importantly. Because no one will ever sacrifice for example, the level of academics his child will get for some moral he believes in or a value. So that will always trump that or other issues. But it's a very important field. There's no land problem. If it was up to land and planning, we could fix this. It's about resources and having them put in that direction. And I urge any of you that care about Israel and want to make sure Israel will be in Israel, your children will want to fight for it, to go and be active in that direction. Every time I'm sure it was the last question.
Right here in the front. Stand up and speak loud.
So, a bunch of questions have already touched on college campuses, and the rabbi touched on it in his sermon and has in the past as well. For institutions that are ostensibly bastions of liberal thought and open discussion, how can we, as American Jews, foment pro-Israel values when anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism are so rampant on those campuses?
I'm not sure I understood your question. How can you...
What can we do as Jews?
On campus? What can you do as Jews on campus?
Yeah, to promote the values of Israel.
It's very, very hard because at this point you're very outnumbered, especially in some of the schools you were aiming at when you talked about intellectual hubs. And I'll answer you not specifically about you, but generally. Right? Generally, when you ask young Jews to identify them, about their identity, Judaism, to many of them, comes very far ahead in what identifies them, much after their favorite music or their favorite food or where they live or things like that. The connection to Israel, for a lot of them, is non-existent. So if you reach a point where you don't even feel it's part of you, and I'm not talking about you, obviously, because you asked the question, you'll never be able to stand up for it. And it can't be fixed without going through the Jews, meaning the first people, I believe, that you need to look at on campus to convince, when you talk about anti-Zionism being the way it is today, being a new form of anti-Semitism on campus, when you do that, the first people you need to have on board are the other Jews. Because if they don't care, it's going to be very hard for you. That's what I've experienced. It's going to be very hard for you to go out and convince other people. But there is a work frame dealing with that question specifically, which is, I don't know if you heard of the Ira definition of anti-Semitism. Have you? Okay, so the Ira definition of anti-Semitism is basically what talks about trying to identify modern-day anti-Semitism, which you encounter on campuses, as anti-Semitism, because people that are saying things that are extremely anti your heritage or your beliefs, but are not calling it in the name of anti-Semitism, are not being called out as anti-Semites, right? Okay, so the Ira definition of anti-Semitism is trying to decide or understand what anti-Semitism is. But the second thing I want to say, and I feel like I've already said it in a different way, is that you need to be able to believe you need to be able to defend Israel the way you believe it should be, okay? Which is not, and I think Israel has made a mistake in the last decade, which is it had a certain kind of diplomacy saying, support us 100% in everything we've ever done, or otherwise you're not part of this debate. Right? If you're not on board with everything we do, we don't want your help. You're not part of this. And the tent of people that felt that Israel was theirs to protect, and that the kind of answers Israel was giving could only be used by people that we're in that very, very narrow tent, intellectually speaking. Okay? And what we try to do today is broaden that tent to a point where there are many ways to talk about Israel, and there are many ways to explain Israel, and there are many ways to explain why an attack on your beliefs on Israel as a Jew that feels historically connected to the land is basically an attack of your freedom. It's very hard to do that, but you can't do it without having being brave about it, getting up, being sure about it, and speaking out. And even if you'll be shouted out, if you yell loud enough and if enough people hear you and agree with you, that's the beginning of change. And we try to do that. We go to universities, we talk to students, we try to empower them. We're also trying to put out, we haven't done enough of that at all, but this is one of my goals, to put out what I call a new terminology for young people to how to speak about Israel and Zionism in a way that resonates with the younger people. Because if you would give some of my answers today to people on campus, you would lose them after 3 seconds. And we haven't exactly figured out what the new age, new wave, short version of explaining it is, but we're trying to work on that, and any help anyone wants to give us with that would be very helpful. There's some man in the back. What would I do if I was in charge with education in Israel? Well, when I was in charge in education in Tel Aviv, the thing I did that I was most proud of, on the level I'm not talking about academics, because we did things on how to change schools and make them more effective and turn them, this was a buzzword 100 years ago, to project-based learning and less classrooms and things like that. I can talk about that for hours. I'm sure that wasn't the question. On our issues, what I did is a project called Chevruta, and I would have done it, and I would do it nationally. And Chevruta takes a subject that all schools study the same. Let's say, for example, English. And Chevruta takes one grade, let's say 11th grade, or 8th grade, or 4th grade, and creates a huge mixer in which all schools in the city are paired into 2 schools. So one is secular, one is religious, or one is a school in the South Tel Aviv with asylum seekers and a migrant workforce, and one is in North Tel Aviv with the upper class Tel Avivians, or one is an Arab school from Jaffa and a Jewish school from Tel Aviv. And you pair them together and you force them to study English together for a year. And you end up, what it costs is you're driving people around all the time, because all of the grade is spending 1 hour a week at the one school and 1 hour the following week at the other school. But they finished that year where at least 1 hour a week they sat chair to chair with kids that they have nothing in common with or that they've never met before. And when you do that for a long enough time, and my dream was to do it all 12 years, we ended up having enough funds to do it for 3 or 4 years out of the 12 years that kids go to school at. But if you finish that the full 12 years, if you do that in all of Israel, if you create a reality in which people know each other from a younger age, then you could change the way people view coexistence, shared living, and more than anything, and that's the biggest problem, you learn to see how other people see the world. Other people don't know how other people see the world. People know how they think other people see the world. So if you're raised fully secular in Israel, and you have a religious neighbor, you think you know how he sees the world, but what you know is what your parents explained to you about he sees the world. And if you had the opportunity to live 4 lives and to see the world through how you see it and then to see the world through how he sees it, it reaches a totally different level of understanding and acceptance. And it's an acceptance that doesn't come from education, it comes from within. You can't fight that kind of acceptance. And every time we mix people together for enough time from different backgrounds, they learn how other people see the world, it's helpful. And I'll give you one example that's not from that, but my wife is sitting here, and she's an actress in Israel, and she plays on a hit TV series called Shababnikim. Have you ever heard of it? It's about ultra-Orthodox kids, youth in Jerusalem that go to yeshivas, and they're extremely excluded, and they don't really know the outer world. And it's about their reality getting on a bus. And I come from a secular family, and when we see a very religious person, ultra-Orthodox person, that doesn't agree to sit next to a woman, we hate that. It's horrible. It's unacceptable. It's chauvinistic. It's horrible. We can't see it. We won't have it. We won't have it. It's a huge debate in Israel. There's a scene in this show that you could otherwise never understand, where one of the young ultra-Orthodox kids sits on a bus in front of a young, extremely attractive woman on the way to the beach, and because you know of all his background, and because you learn about his upbringing, and because you know what he was told by his parents, you see how he suffers through that. And you can really see him suffering, not being against it, suffering. Now, it doesn't mean you accept that, because there's a social contract and what we agree to and what not. But you end up understanding that it's not hatred, understanding that it's not exactly chauvinism the way you call it, and that it's something else that if you didn't know this character from inside, you'd never understand. And I think what the world lacks is understanding of other people in the United States and in Israel. And that's the one thing I would change.
I'm going to ask the last question. So, years ago, we had a wonderful political commentator in the United States, Tim Russert. And many of us remember Tim Russert sitting with his whiteboard showing that if Ohio went to Bush, but Florida went to Gore, Gore would win, but if Ohio and Florida went to Bush, but Pennsylvania went to Gore, then Gore would win. So Israel has elections coming up. I'm going to ask you to play Tim Russert for a moment. And can you handicap a little bit what it is that we can expect? You indicated that you expected it to be somewhat the same, but can you maybe dive into that just a little bit?
This is torture for me, what I'm going to say. It's torture for me because this is the thing I'm best at, I love most, and for the first time in my life I'm not allowed to do. Because Tim Russert was a commentator and I'm a diplomat from the Israeli government. And the only thing I really can't do is kind of do political commentary, which I would love to do. I can do one thing. I can tell you that the smartest piece of journalism that's been written about these upcoming elections was written by a woman named Emanu-El, and she writes for Haaretz, and she posted a column about 2 weeks ago about and she called it what the Israeli elections are really about and what differs. But what she said at the end, maybe you as Americans can relate to this and maybe you can't. She said, okay, there are 4 groups in Israel. They are our extreme right, extreme right, and ultra-Orthodox. There is extreme left and most of the Arab parties, okay, and then there's the moderate left and the moderate right. And the moderate left and the moderate right are the ones that hate each other the most. And they are the ones that basically, if you look at if you really talk not to the TV stars or the politicians, the people, these are the 2 groups that have the most in common out of the 4 groups. So they theoretically could agree on most things and have the most stability. But these 2 groups are really fighting about who controls the country. The sides of the groups, they don't even have any, they don't pretend to want to control the country. They tag along, they're part of coalitions. These 2 groups, one of them has to be given control by the other. And one feels that it established the country, and one feels that it should own it now, or it dominates it now. And it's these very little differences in style, in substance, TV, things they prefer. They're very little. They're amplified, but they're smaller than we think. I know that a few months ago, when your country was hectic about the cancellation of Roe versus Wade, and the idea that every state will have the possibility to decide whatever they want. Well, I saw the ones that tried up till now, and what you see is, correct me if I'm wrong, more lines of what I just said, is that when you give all the people the opportunity, they're less radical than portrayed on TV. They're less radical than Twitter, okay? They're more willing to have kind of compromises when it's them. And I wish that we could overcome that in Israel, because I think we lack a lot of stability, and that's a huge problem, but I honestly don't see that happening anytime soon, for reasons that you can read about, you don't need me to say, and I'm not allowed to say anyhow. Thank you. Shana Tova.
As I tried to convey in my remarks earlier today, this is a moment when we focus ourselves on what is most important to us as spiritual human beings and as religious human beings. It is a moment, certainly, where we focus on our responsibility as Jews to the wider world, but our responsibility as Jews to world Jewry and the land of Israel and the people of Israel. And that is why every year it is so meaningful to us to have the Consul General of Israel in New York come and speak. And as I said to Ambassador Zamir last spring at the Yom HaZikaron service, that's Israel's Memorial Day service, of all of the opportunities I have over the course of the year, there is nothing that is more moving for me as an American Jew who is a committed Zionist to play some role in hosting that service. And as the ambassador said, we have a responsibility to ourselves and to our children to help them feel that connection and to nurture it along. Each year, each spring, we host this service, and we'll make it known in our temple bulletin, as we always do. I would encourage you to come to it, to be there, to sit with Israelis who are here living in New York as they recall the history of their people and the sacrifice that all have made. That will help in your kishkas really reaffirm what it means to be part of a people for whom Israel is our spiritual homeland. And Asaf, we're so grateful to you. Maya, we're so grateful to have you here, and to your staff. Sweet, sweet New Year to everybody. L'Shana Tova.